Hello, YouTube. Welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, Master of Lore and Storyteller Extraordinaire. For today, we're going to be talking about something that I consider to be very much a linchpin when it comes to putting together a really good, really solid campaign. It's something no story, regardless of setting, could ever do without, and that is loot. Quest rewards, ribbons, medals, pay raises, all the shiny things that make your players go ooh and ah. All those delightful little things there that really you just want to find at the end of a good adventure, a good story, some kind of really good payout on top of just the awesome climax that you've had set up for this adventure. Now, when it comes to putting loot together, I'm sure a lot of people think, well, of course, that's easy. That's not hard to do at all. And really, no. None of this is hard. It just takes a little bit of time and effort. And as always, putting in details, having considerations with regards to story is always going to be key, even when it comes to putting together loot. And when it comes to putting together these rewards, they don't always have to come at the end of a campaign either, or an adventure within a campaign. It just really depends on what kind of a layout and story structure you want to do. But we're here to focus on how to put together better loot for your players. Now, giving them coins, credits, any kind of monetary reward is always going to be useful. I mean, it's like getting gift cards on your birthday. You can go spend that on whatever you want. Get yourself set up and established however properly you feel best fits your character. But there's something to be said for the little items that you can throw their way. Well, I say little, they don't always have to be little, and for that matter, doesn't always have to be items that are rewards for your characters. Again, many of you may be saying, well, yeah, of course, but just bear in mind that this is just a general guide for building better campaigns, and I'm talking about some fairly broad, fairly basic ideas and concepts when it comes to putting these campaigns together. So bear with me a moment here. Now, when you're putting these rewards together, think about you always think about your players, who their characters are, the kinds of actions they undertake, their methods of playing, their play styles. Bring that all under consideration when it comes to putting together these items that you're rewarding your characters with. Um, and really, you can get crazy with it. Again, always, you're only limited by your imagination when it comes to this stuff. Um, like, okay, so say your players have just gone through and killed some god awful beastie, whatever ending big bad you had in place, or they just had crappy luck and ended up rolling a really strong monster on a random encounter chart. And not if you've been doing your job as a storyteller and you're throwing in random encounters, you've kind of taken some consideration to balance things a little bit, but you can still throw some awkward or really challenging things at the players in order to keep them on their toes. So let's say they've overcome that, some kind of difficult challenge, and there's a payout. There's an immediate payout available. Obviously, like we already discussed, coins are a pretty readily available and accepted thing by all players across all settings and all games. But there's other things that you can throw out there. For example, let's take gems, different precious gemstones. There's an advantage to these because, well, again, going with Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons, or even stuff like Rome, any sort of high fantasy setting, the advantage when it comes to using different precious stones is they're usually worth multiples in coins. 5 gold pieces here, 20 gold pieces there, a couple of platinum here. Some variation or measure of coin value can be applied to various stones. So, what this does is this lightens the load the players are carrying if you're the type of storyteller that focuses on that sort of a thing. But it allows them to transport more money using less space and less weight. Now, one little house rule that I usually throw out there, just because gold gets heavy, it gets heavy fast, and if you figure your standard gold piece in most fantasy settings is measured in an ounce. So 10,000 gold pieces, that's 10,000 ounces. That weight begins to add up really damn fast, and it's kind of hard to explain where and how the players' characters are storing all this gold without looking like they're hauling around part of Scrooge McDuck's money bin. So, one little house rule I throw out there, and I usually throw it out there kind of quick, usually by about level 5 when the players are starting to build up a supply of money, is I just give them a bag of coin holding. It's basically a bag of holding, but it's designed specifically for coins and gems, just so that they're not having to fuss around with it. It's an easy thing to do in a high fantasy setting. It's easy to explain. It just gets it out of the way so that we're not focused on stupid logistical things like that. Um, I say stupid. For some of you, it may not be stupid. It may be a very fine point that you like to make, but for me, it's not what I want to focus on. It's not something I want to be trying to explain or force the players to try to explain or work their way around. But anyways, that's just how one way I solve that particular issue, and it lets me and lets the players just have coinage on hand for when it's needed without creating a whole bunch of fuss. But again, gemstones are also a good way around this. It's probably not as functionally as useful as like some sort of bag of holding designed specifically around valuables, but it's still one way that you can do this. Another great way to give unique rewards to your players are just oddball items, unique little curiosities that have some inherent value to them. One of my favorites that I saw come up, forget where, but I was reading around, and the idea of having, say, a crystallized dragon's heart that's been inlaid with platinum and gold, something about the size of a pumpkin. So, not something off of a very large dragon, but it's still a heart that has ended up somehow becoming crystallized. And then an artisan has worked it and done very fine uh, work inlaying gold, silver, platinum, and the like, and giving it this artistic quality and it raising its inherent value. Um, is something like its, its base value is something like 10,000 gold pieces, and that was before the players did any sort of diplomacy or haggling in order to barter a better price out of the item, which to my mind, I think they could really easily, and they could get way more money out of that if they found the right buyer with plenty of money to burn. But again, that's just one of those little things you can do to give your players something that has an inherent value to it, an intrinsic value that other people, NPCs, are going to see as well. And it's unique, it's different, and it's just kind of cool. It's just a neat little thing that you can throw out there, or I also like throwing out tapestries. In particular, I like using tapestries that are somehow not fully um, not made of a fully physical substance that exists on the material realm with the players. It could be almost ghostly, so it's like a ghostly portrait painted and worked by a master who is also a talented wizard that poured his effort and his magical energies into creating this particular portrait. So it's a portrait the players can sort of interact with, but they need specialized equipment to really move it effectively, get it hung up. But it just looks cool because it's essentially a semi-solid, semi-physical, ghostly image that they can interact with and look at. It I don't know. That's my own personal taste and aesthetic. I think it just sounds and looks really cool in my head. Not sure what you quite make of it, but again, it's just that little oddball, unique, different little thing that you can throw out there. Um, Another thing you can do is to throw out different items that are enchanted somewhat. In the Warhammer Fantasy setting, the Skaven in Clan Pestilence, Skaven, for those of you who don't know, are essentially ratmen, and Clan Pestilence is, well, it's a clan of plague rats, essentially. They spread plague, and they use plague-bearing sensors, and these sensors, they swing around on the battlefield, they strike their enemies with them, and the contagions unleashed from it just leave these horrible festering wounds or just immediately putrefy skin through really rapid advancing necrosis, and it just eats away at flesh and bone. Awful, awful way to die. But, it gave me an idea. Could do something similar in any of these other fantasy settings with these sensors. You could have one that, as it's swung, and a person of the appropriate faith relating to the sensor, and it's the holy symbols adorning it in particular, as long as they're reciting prayers and swinging the sensor around, it emits its incense, the smoke, and it starts billowing out, and it forms a circle of protection against good, against evil, law, or chaos, or any of that, any of those alignment-oriented things, or even against undead, evil outsiders, any number of different things. Um, and we could even go a step further and make it so it functions like a flail, so that the players essentially have a holy magic weapon that they can make use of, and when they need to create a little bit of space, throw a little bit of defense up there, they can create a magical circle of protection with it just by swinging and chanting with it. Obviously, you might want to limit that to a certain number of times per day so that the players just can't abuse the crap out of it. But again, it's just that unique little extra that just gives, well, it gives character to the reward and the loot that the players are getting. And giving a little story to different items can also help add to that character and that little bit of charm that just makes things stick for players. Like, okay, the players have looted a keep. It was originally abandoned a couple centuries ago, but a marauding band of red wizards that they had set up shop there, hired plenty of mercenaries, and they were conducting raids, taking slaves, and performing horrible arcane magical experiments here on people, or sending slaves back to use as fodder for their experiments back in Thay. And the players have overcome them. They've driven them out from the ruins of this keep, and they're going through the loot that's built up here, and they find a +1 longsword. Well, okay, that's cool. It's a magic sword, extra chance to hit, extra damage. But you could always go a step further with it. Describe it. It's a finely wrought blade with a keen edge that just seems to have that little extra something to it, a certain je ne sais quoi that you can't quite put your finger on. The blade has three deep, well-made, well in a space, evenly spaced and maintained fullers running down the length of the blade, and the cross guard forms almost like is the cross guard, and the hilt is a complex form where the wires for it just twist and move around in a complex pattern that provides an extra level of protection. The handle is wrapped with a finely colored deep reddish leather, and the lower half of the handle has been wrapped with a wire grip. And the pommel forms the head of a howling wolf holding an opal within its jaws. And that's just a little bit of extra detail there for this magic sword. Now, it looks cool. It looks badass. I think it looks badass, but again, that's me. You make of it what you will, but just throwing in a little bit of extra detail there takes a +1 longsword from, +1 longsword, a little bit of extra statistical information, but then you add more to it and give it more character. Um, just doing little things like that will, again, go such a long ways for making better loot. And also going off of the building your loot and items around your story and what you have laid out, Let's go ahead and just take an example from the Putting It All Together video that I threw up a couple weeks ago. Elias Briarthorn has a number of magic items on him, fairly unique items. The Crown of Ymnaris, it's the skull and antlers of his slain animal companion, the wild stag, who's the spirit inhabiting this particular stag was said to be the king of this particular forest, and that connection that this stag animal companion had still existed within the skull, but it was now this corrupted, baleful, hateful kind of spirit to it now. And so that manifested as this physical and spiritual corruption that just oozed this pustulating rot, and it connected it throughout the forest to any other creature or humanoid that had become infected with this rot. Now, most players probably wouldn't want to pick that up, but if there are any evil players, or in particular any druids that are going down or thinking about going down this particular blighted druid path, there's a pretty powerful item right there. Now, given the nature of the item and its connection to the forest, that one may not work so well unless you're planning a campaign sticking around in this area for a good long while there. In my mind, that particular item might end up being one that gets destroyed just because it's so integrally tied to the corruption that's spreading. But there's other items like that he has, like his scimitar, Rot Talon. It's a +2 ironwood scimitar that has become, it's just overcome and infested with this infection that just drips and pustulates and oozes all through it. And anytime it makes contact, it does a little bit of extra damage. In similar fashion, actually, to like what the plague sensors of the Warhammer Fantasy Ratmen make use of. It's actually, now that I think about it, kind of fairly similar to that, but it's still a powerful and relatively unique item. Something kind of cool that the players might want to pick up afterwards. Again, probably going to be more of a blighted druid that if any of the players are playing a druid and they want to kind of go down and pursue this particular path. But it's just that item has that little extra bit of character and story to it. It belonged to this powerful elder druid within this ancient circle, this coven of druids. And it used to be this item that was put to use in defending these forests, and now it's a source of corruption. It reflects the diseased nature of its owner now, or of its previous owner, if the players are successful in overcoming Elias Briarthorn. Again, that's just one example, a couple of examples there of items and loot being built up around the particular story, and doing that just again, these little details just make the world feel more enriched and more alive. And it's just really cool as you go along going through all of this, and the players just get so immersed into it. And then they get attached to these particular items. Some time ago, when I was running that steampunk high fantasy-ish sort of setting, one of my players, they were part of escorting this caravan. In particular, this caravan had a diplomat from the Orcish nation of Three Tusk Hold, and one of the players, he was part of this military unit from the Corbarian Empire, a more elite veteran sort of unit that was assigned to help escort the diplomat, along with the diplomat's own retinue of bodyguards. And once they hit this particular point in the trail, the captain for this player's unit had turned to give orders, and as he turned, they just heard this whiz, this plink off of metal, and then the captain's helmet just basically erupted out the back in a fountain of blood, bone, and brain matter. He'd taken a bullet straight through the face. The NPC that shot him, I built him as a marksman, as a long-range sniper, deadly in his own right as it was, but he kind of rolled a critical hit with a firearm, and, well, badass NPC or no, there wasn't much you could do about a critical hit to the face. But so this NPC dies. The players go through this action defending the caravan as these bandits and raiders come running up with long range marksmen just throwing down all kinds of fire down range at them, picking them off as they try to flee. And they work their way through all of this. And the player actually makes the effort to go back and recovers his captain's body and strips his plate armor off of him. Now, the character's only about level level 1, level 2 at the time. And level 2 getting plate armor early is it's a bit much, but I got to delaying it a little bit. The armor had to be refitted for him, and that was going to cost a pretty penny. But because he had put his life on the line and went above and beyond the Call of Duty protecting this foreign diplomat, the diplomat, in a show of gratitude, actually offered to cover the cost. It was just going to take a little bit. And also, the helmet had to be replaced. So, when they got back to Corvair City and the Orcish diplomat got to her embassy where she would be staying, she had the player come up, take his had a armor smith take his measurements, make sure he was fitted properly, and then set about the couple week long task of refitting the armor, reshaping it a little bit, adjusting the buckles and straps, and also making a new helmet for him. And the helmet is essentially in the shape of a lion, and the jaws form the visors that open and close around his face. Now, it's not magical, and it's certainly not Mastercraft, but it is a suit of plate armor that has that little extra bit of customization to it now, and it's something specifically fitted to a rather a rather scandalous character now. Looting your superior of his armor off the battlefield. That's ballsy, but it all played out. It played out in a satisfactory way, and yes, he's got this armor now, but still got a few things up my sleeve to mess with him a little bit, even though his armor class is a little bit higher than it probably should be at about level 3-ish or so. Or are they at 4 now? I'll have to check my notes later. That'll be something for another time. But again, the idea is that these little extra details, this little bit of extra character as you go through the story, and these little rewards crop up here and there or come about at the end of an adventure, just lend itself really well. And the plate armor wasn't the only reward that the player got there. The player actually has the favor or some favor with a foreign diplomat now, and that, granted, that's all going to come out more through our role play than anything else, but still, it's another reward. It's something that's not monetary, kind of hard to measure exactly what its value is, but it is a foreign diplomat. So that value is there. It's something that they probably will be making use of at some point. But again, that'll be a story for another time. So, ideally, what this should come down to, if nothing else, what you take away, take the extra bit of time to put a little bit of detail into these rewards and base some of these rewards around the particular story that you have in play here, and try to come up with rewards that are more than just coins or this +2 shield or this +1 suit of armor or this +1 ring. And don't be afraid. Oh, yes, sorry, let me add, don't be afraid to create your own unique items and ideas. Another player in this particular steampunk fantasy setting found this strange metal cylinder. And essentially, what this metal cylinder did, it would attach and meld with a firearm, and give the firearm a property that allowed it to fire underwater, or it essentially creates an air pocket around it, preventing moisture from getting to the firearm. So, rainy weather, on the deck of a ship, underneath water, he can still fire normally without risking the powder getting damp and misfiring. It may still screw up in other ways, like if he rolls a 1, but it won't be due to excessive amounts of moisture getting to his powder. And it's not exactly something that's standard to a lot of the books. There's other similar things, but take similar ideas and apply them in different and unique ways, and you can come up with some pretty cool things that you can give to your players, or rather, that your players can earn and really should be earning. Don't just throw things at them left and right without a plan. If you start, one thing to be careful of, if you start just rolling out loot after loot, item after item, and it gets to be this backlog of different really awesome items, one, it just kind of becomes stale after a while, and two, you're starting to give your players a little bit too much power. Like I said before, the the one player's the fighter who got the plate armor, that might have been a little bit too high of a reward, but um, I figured he had earned it, and we were able to role play it out. And there's still plenty of other ways I can mess with him regardless. So I do have a plan, despite him having a higher than normal armor class at this level. But if you say you have some NPCs out there and you want them to be able to have a great degree of mobility around the battlefield, and you think, well, what's a great way for these higher end assassins to get into position? I know, boots of teleportation. That'll be fantastic. They can move around the battlefield at will, get into great flanking positions, and support each other, and deal a great deal of backstabbing damage, sneak attack damage. Well, I mean, that's not a bad idea. Mobility is fantastic, and this lets assassins who need to have flanking or at least surprise to get off that sneak attack damage. It definitely meshes well with that skill set and how the character needs to play. But if the players overcome them, and say you've thrown 6 assassins at them and they all have boots of teleportation, that's 6 boots of teleportation the players now have, and they can sell the excess if they want, or they can keep them on hand. Either way, that's an extra plot problem for you to deal with now. That's 6 boots of teleportation that'll potentially and more than likely let your players just run roughshod over what you have planned in the campaign. A better idea is to give the characters a unique ability. I mean, if these were high-end assassins that have had access to boots of teleportation, I think it's safe to say we could um, throw in and give them some inherent magical ability. Let's say that these are assassins that were specifically trained on the plane of shadow, and their time on the plane of shadow gave them an ability similar to a shadow dancer's ability, where they can step and move through shadows. This still gives them a level of mobility, maybe not quite the same as, say, boots of teleportation, but they can still move around. Shadows are definitely within keeping of the assassin aesthetic, and it prevents the players from getting a hold of a bunch of powerful items if they overcome these assassins. So the other point to take away there is just to have some thought and some care with how you reward your players, or what you put into the game that the players could potentially get a hold of. Whatever you throw out there, you should have some thoughts and ideas on how you can deal with that or negate those things. There's another particular instance that I can uh, share with you here, playing through playing through an old friends campaign in the D20 modern setting. We got to take a quick little jaunt through the realms of Faerun with our D20 modern characters. And over the course, we ended up fighting this company of mercenaries. Well, they all had cloaks of invisibility, and these cloaks ran for something like 10, 20 minutes at a time. And it was something like 50 mercenaries. Well, we killed every single last one of them with a great deal of superior firepower, and well, most of the cloaks were intact, so it's like 50, so it was about maybe 40-ish cloaks that we could still gather that were still usable afterwards. And it wasn't until about, well, the next big part of the adventure, the next leg in the story, that he realized, oh crap, uh, wow, you guys are sneaking through and bypassing everything here. Oh damn, shit, I didn't think that through. Well, you need to have a little bit of care there. A one cloak of invisibility per person would have been one thing. It's only 10 minutes, 20 minutes of invisibility per person if we decided to use it all at once. One cloak for everybody for a shadowy team of spec ops characters, that works, it makes sense. But having 40 of them, we just switch out as we needed. We could essentially stay invisible throughout the whole campaign or throughout the whole mission with the exception of when we needed to switch cloaks. Um, he did find a couple ways around it. He decided, well, these just make you invisible to regular sight. If they're using infravision, looking for heat changes in heat signature, they'll detect you that way. So, okay, that's fair. That's one workaround. Um, Ultimately, he got around it as we ended up with a crew of NPCs. We decided, well, if we want to give these guys a decent shot, so we gave, these 20 or so, 30 some odd NPC crew members each a cloak of invisibility. Well, a lot of them ended up getting gunned down and falling into the ocean to be lost forever, or at least lost forever if we wanted to have a chance of boarding the submarine before it dove. Um, it was a whole thing, but yeah, we lost about 30 of our cloaks of invisibility at that point. So, little ways to work around and deal with things. Saying there's always stuff like dispel magic to mess with magic items you may have rewarded your player with, but again, uh, it's easier to just think about it a little bit beforehand. Build build your rewards around the story. Make the descriptions and the items just a little bit cool with a little bit of extra detail, and just be careful with what you give to your players. I think we'll go ahead and leave it there for now. I have been your host, Jordan, Master of Lore and Storyteller Extraordinaire. Thank you all for your time. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe. Click the bell icon so that you get notified when I've got more content coming down the line for you guys. Once again, thank you all for your time. Have yourselves a good night.